It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belghast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again. Time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 498. Tonight I'm joined by Ashgar.
Hello.
Grace.
Beep boop.
Kodra.
They do not break us, they break upon us.
Tam.
Beep boop.
And Thalen.
Hi. I don't know why, but beep boop. It just...
Sometimes we beep, sometimes we boop, sometimes we boop boop. So we didn't do a show last week, because, I don't know, we were down a bunch of people. Or are you going to say, Ash, that I so rudely interrupted?
No, go ahead.
We have quite possibly the longest list of topics that we have ever had in a show that is not a end of the year show. We're not going to get through a fraction of these, so let's roll. Xenoblade Chronicles X is coming on the Switch.
Speaking of beep boop, Nintendo has announced a definitive version of the Xenoblade Chronicles that's about giant robots. It's about other things too. And honestly, Emma should be telling you about it, but Emma was not here today, so you get me. I haven't finished 3, but this might be my favorite game in the series. I'm not normally one to have a lot of enjoyment in open world games, which this very, very much is. But in this one, the world actually, it's important. The central conceit is that you have crash landed on this alien planet, and you have to figure out how to survive with your colony, lovingly named New Los Angeles, and how to get along with the other various alien life on this planet. It doesn't connect very closely to the rest of the Xenoblade Chronicles games. That may be less true with the Definitive Edition. We'll have to see. There's a little teaser at the end of the trailer that may be relevant. But I really look forward to seeing this one again, since this was the only reason I still have my Wii U hooked up to my TV.
Yeah, I liked what I played of it. I have not managed to get through any of these games in this series, so at some point I hope I will. It certainly looked cool.
And again, what's not to love about flying around in a giant mech? This game does also have one of the most complicated combat systems I've ever seen in any game. So that's also a thing.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a thing. It does make adjusting to it kind of hard. Like the initial learning curve is a little steeper than it probably should be. But it's really fun to use once you understand how it works.
Utopia Must Fall.
So this has been eating up all of my gaming time this week, mostly because I don't have the bandwidth for anything any more complicated. And I'm not sure if folks mentioned this in the past or not, but if Nova Drift is a modern version of Asteroids, then Utopia Must Fall is a modern version of Missile Command.
Ooh,
and
I'm here for this.
It's delightful. It has a very distinctive old school vector graphics kind of aesthetic that is just really weirdly satisfying and appealing for how simple it is. I think it's still in early access, so there's balance that needs to be done, but it's sort of a roguelike Missile Command. You play until you die, and you get to choose upgrades along the way. I appreciate the game's sense of humor. It's not that there's no story here, right? It's Missile Command, but when you get to choose your upgrades, one of the upgrades is usually a citizen proposal. And the citizen proposals are things like, we're going to have a song contest to try to distract ourselves from the end of the world, or we're going to trust in business to figure out a way to business away the aliens. And they're all terrible, and you always ignore them, and that is how you re-roll your choices. and it's so perfect.
Okay, that's a delight. I love that.
Yeah, it's just really great. The all of the you can achieve different sort of mini objectives during each level or each day of play, and so it's possible to end up with more than one upgrade per day if you're better than I am at playing the game. And there's some things to discover, just in terms of if certain choices or certain achievements will unlock different options for your upgrades. And I've just been having a boatload of fun messing around with, do I upgrade my gun? Do I upgrade my shields? Do I upgrade my nuclear weapons? Yeah, and just the music is spot on. I don't really have anything to fault it on. It's still early access. They're definitely adding more things. I think a beta version just went up yesterday or the day before, that I haven't had a chance to take a look at yet. But for what it is, it has the addictiveness of Peglin for me, where even in early access, it's complete enough that I can't stop playing it. So yeah, definitely recommend this to just kill a little bit of time. It is certified on deck. My only complaint on when I tried to play it on the deck is that it uses the little touchpad, and that's not my favorite method of input, but it's great with a mouse, and yeah, it's kind of delightful, and it's only a couple bucks, so
Yeah, I gotta put this on the list. It sounds like a ton of fun.
yeah, it's definitely worth checking, and I think it's going to be one of those ones where I'm going to play the heck out of it for a little bit longer, and then I'm going to set it aside, and I'll come back when it's had a couple more updates and see what's changed. But it's definitely, for early access, it feels complete enough for sure.
Oh yeah, that's inexpensive enough to be an instant purchase.
I am playing it right now. you sold me.
Mission accomplished.
It's like Missile Command meets Galaga plus a little bit of asteroids, and yeah, very nice.
So I think loosely related, Nodebuster.
It's got a similar aesthetic and a similar I don't want to think about things ideas. I've been playing Nodebuster, which is a sort of incremental clicker style game, but it's not an idle game, not really, in that you have a reticle you aim around and fire at nodes, and you take your earnings back to a gigantic skill tree and get upgrades and try to challenge higher levels. The game does have a cap, both in terms of how difficult things can be and how like skill tree doesn't last forever. It's not procedurally generated or anything. So the game has an end, unlike a lot of roguelike type games. But it is sort of just like mindless fun to not have to worry about anything for a bit. And if you like skill trees, this game definitely has some skill tree. The music in the actual level it's not like particularly excellent. Like it does what it needs to do. I don't really remember it afterwards, unfortunately. Not unlike something like Balatro, where it's just stuck in my head the whole time. But I had a lot of fun with this.
In my head now.
And basically 100%ed it in about 5 hours. It is real cheap. So if you're looking for a sort of very simple and yet enjoyable game, this is definitely an option.
So Wayfinder is a game that I alpha tested well over a year ago, thought was pretty but not good enough to pay $100+ premium, founders pack for, and
weren't
mostly
allowed to talk about it initially.
Right, yeah, I didn't even blog about this game or talk about it on the podcast because it was very strictly NDA'd. And I was shocked when like a month after the alpha that we were in, it was suddenly launching for full price into early access. But this was a game from Airship Syndicate, and it was being published by Digital Extremes, and it was fine. It was kind of fun.
We had a good time, I think, messing around together.
Yeah. But also,
when
like,
it
I wasn't inspired to go out and buy the thing. So a whole slew of things have happened since then. One, Digital Extremes essentially decided they weren't going to publish it anymore. Airship Syndicate decided that they were going to completely gut out any MMO aspect to the game and turn it into a single player co-op or co-optional experience. So it no longer has a always on server component. It has peer-to-peer, connect up with your friends. It also has, cross-play on all the major platforms and is now like a $25 game that just has stupid amounts of content in it. Like, it's got a very robust housing system in it.
Yeah, the house in there is huge.
Yeah. So I've been playing around a little bit with it. Like, I got distracted more recently by a bunch of single player games that I've been playing, but it has turned into a shockingly fun experience. It kind of reminds me of like a Monster Hunter World type experience where completely soloable, but you can also like invite someone and do shenanigans with them.
Yeah, we need to group up and see how it feels now that it's an actual game and not just an alpha test. Because it was really fun to run around together and do some of the little mini dungeons and kill bosses. And I think it would be really fun to do now. I've also been playing it since it launched. And yeah, it's fun. It's a bit of what I like about something like Destiny without a lot of the things I don't like about Destiny. It's just like a really huge world to run around in and lots of little short bite-sized dungeons to duck in and out of.
There's enough randomization in the dungeons to make them feel different each time you go in.
And you can customize them a little bit too. There's a bunch of characters, and I've only been messing around with the same one that I played in alpha, so I need to kind of test a couple of the other ones and see if I like them better. But
you basically start the game and you choose one of 3 characters, and then that is your first character, and then a little bit of the way into the story you unlock the other 2 options. So like for pretty quickly you're going to have a stable of 3 characters that you can play at will, and then others unlock through the main story quest.
I mean, that's the thing that is really interesting about the way that this has now launched, is that there was a lot of sort of premium content that you no longer have to pay for. So there's like weird echoes of that. Like there's a sort of a cosmetic reward tree. And it's the sort of thing that you could see in a sort of freemium game. But this just unlocks through normal gameplay without any additional purchases or weird gating required. Just kind of seems to scale along with your XP. So there's things like that I appreciate.
It's like that. What if AFK Journey Southernly was completely wide open and free?
I love the aesthetic. It reminds me a lot of WildStar, so I get a lot of WildStar nostalgia when I play.
The housing specifically reminds me of WildStar housing, just from the way that you place things and all the random things that you find out in the world that you can drag into your house. Yeah. I have a pet hermit crab that pinches me every time I pet the hermit crab, and also I temporarily get a bleeding debuff.
I have a bird It does not give me a debuff that I'm aware of, but I love that I wander around in the world, and most of the time, if I find a body of water, I will find a fish of some sort that I can bring back and throw in my house. It's just, I don't know. Yeah, it's that random element of finding housing stuff out in the world, and it's a little cartoony and silly. So yeah, definitely get the Wildstar nostalgia from it. But it's just really fun. I don't know if it's like captivating forever, but I think it's certainly at this point worth the price of admission. And I really do want to kind of try to get a group together, or at least group up with the two of us and see if it is as fun as the promise of it was in alpha.
Yeah, because
Okay.
there's a lot of like player interaction type functionality. Like this character like grants the party this ability, you know. So I think it would be fun to be group play in this game.
I am looking at this because this is sounding interesting to me. I was in the beta or the like super NDA beta.
Yeah, like and
Same.
it was fine. I just wasn't inspired to buy into
yeah,
it. Like
it was
Yes.
fine. I didn't really get that far into it. I remember the beginning being kind of a slog.
Do they have invert Y yet?
I don't know.
Because I tried the beta and couldn't play it.
We should find out if it has invert Y, which is
Like, I'm not going to pay dollars to play beta for a game that I know didn't have invert Y before.
but I'm intrigued. Like, what is the structure of this game now? Is it levels, or is it just like is there builds going on? I see that they are saying it's a co-op ARPG, and I'm like,
Action RPG. You should not
Yeah.
read this like it's like Diablo.
okay, but when you say ARPG, you're really like, got it.
You're using the traditional ARPG definition.
Yeah, but then a lot of people call those action RPGs. Naming things is hard.
Yeah, like there is a certain measure of build craft, but a lot of it's what you're talenting. There's some basic talent point type stuff going on, and there's also some artifacts, and you can have 3 artifacts equipped, and they all do slightly different things.
And you get essentially little upgrades that you can plug into, I think, your weapon
Yeah.
and your artifacts that, you know, will add a. I
You
don't
get
know.
materia.
Some of them add abilities. Most of them just give some stat upgrades. So there's a little bit of customization there too. It's nothing like groundbreaking, but it's not just a static character.
Sure, how much of this is going to be a challenge if person with little time to play, want to play with friends who have lots of time to play and are probably like 20 levels different from me?
This we don't know yet, and this is something that we need to test because I've only played it solo right now, and I think Grace has also only played it solo.
Yep.
So I'm curious about how well scaling works. Like when I played it way back when, I think I remember it scaling pretty well.
Yeah, I thought that was one of the things we were kind of happy about. And I know I've played it less than you have, Bel, in this recent bout. So I think if we managed to group up, we'd have a better sense of whether it's scaling well or not.
I think I will hold off on my decision until I find out more about that, because unfortunately I am coming to the realization that I just have a whole lot less time than a lot of my friends to play these things right now.
Yes, understandable. Like right now, it's got, from what I can tell, a fairly robust campaign, and then playing through the campaign unlocks everything, essentially. Levels come really fast. Also, you get a bunch of currency while doing crap that's basically the equivalent of the level up currency in a gacha game. So
Aren't
you
the
can
levels per character though, so like you're gonna need to do it again if you pick a different character.
Yeah, if you want to play different characters, like it's kind of like swapping warframes.
Yep. All right.
But
Those
you do
also
have
level real fast.
the character XP items that you can use.
Yeah, and it seems to be real prolific with that sort of stuff. Also, like they got rid of some of the crafting, but like items drop constantly, and also it seems like there's a vendor in town where you can basically go buy the latest version of a weapon to match your level. It's interesting. Like it's doing some cool stuff. I like what it's doing. I want to play more, especially with like try co-op and see how well it scales. But yeah, like it's real cheap. Like it's $25 and there's no monetization attached to it other than $25.
You can also buy a Critical Role pack.
You can pay like an additional $20 to have Critical Role themed skins for the characters that you unlock through the campaign. Like I fully support them selling nonsense like that. If they want to make additional money after the purchase, go for it. I had enough fun that I bought the Critical Role pack just for the hell of it, to throw them at $20. Competitions that aren't.
Oh man. So there is something about minis games that leads people, like minis games are generally inherently 1v1 PvP competitions. It's like the simplest form of competitive play. And yet so many people interact with them in a way that is like, yes, that, but not really. And I find it really fascinating. It's like one of my favorite ways to play games. Like, yes, this is technically a competition, but like the fact that there are results is basically a formality. It's a formality that exists only only to make the rules make any sense. And so I went. My wife and I today went to a minis painting draft competition, which is just concept, like it's a competition in basically name only, but it's conceptually such a cool. It was conceptually super cool. Like you come in, you roll a die to figure out what place in what like your draft order is, and then you go through drafting an unpainted mini, of which there were like 30 of various shapes and sizes, and five paints one at a time from a like full paint set, and they had two full paint sets of like one particular brand. And so like you get a mini and 5 paints in 3.5 hours to do whatever you can with like a limited palette and a mini you've never seen before. And it's super fun. And like it's like, yeah, everybody's like painting what they can, doing the best they can. But like it was really neat. I mean, it was also really neat because like nobody cared. I mean, the prizes were really good, but like nobody really cared about them. Like judging was by vote at the end of the thing from the people who participated. So you got to see everybody else's minis and vote, and it was cool. But it was interesting to me, like 30 people were there and 0 of them were the like, I'm here to win kind of like mindset. And it's so rare that I see an event like that. Like there's usually always somebody. But no, it was just like a day of chill painting vibes and people swapping tips and, complimenting each other's work and colors and like, oh, that's a really cool idea. One guy gave another person they're like, oh man, I'm stuck with these colors. I don't know what to do with these. Like partway through the draft process, they're like, oh, you could do this. It's like, oh, that is cool. I just like went with that idea. I just got the entire idea from somebody else. This is a really like, I don't know, wholesome and fun experience. And I love that in games. Like I want more like play formats that are that.
I think like part of what's also going to happen in something like this is it's a lot less discreet who is going to win or lose based on any given thing. And so, like, if somebody's just being awful to people, like, that person's probably not going to win just based on the fact that they were being awful to a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, well, I mean, nobody knew how it was being judged until the end anyway.
Yeah.
It just wasn't relevant. Like, the actual resolution wasn't even relevant. But I think you're right. Like, the fact that the way results were tabulated was like not like upfront, maybe. You know, I'm imagining, like, what if you played a game? It's like you play a game to the best of your ability with a broad set of goals, but then the actual, like, way you score points is determined, like, by drawing cards from the deck and being like, did I do that this game? Oh, I did.
What if the game changed every time?
Yeah, like, it's a huge part of the reason I love Dropout too. It's like, yes, that's a competition, but it's actively spoiled if you try too hard to win. It's more about
I don't think that's true.
the chill experience it creates.
Yeah, but the entire point of that show is that they're all comedians. So what are they going to do in this weird situation?
Yeah.
The competition is just a thing that has to happen.
And also, how annoyed can we make Brennan?
Well, I mean, I think it's really telling because, like, you know, Brennan, that show is absolutely the I must win guy, and he just sort of stops showing up in the show except for special occasions after, like, the first season and a half.
I mean, he was in a lot of this.
Quite a lot of, yeah.
He comes back for special episodes when they're doing something, like, specific or, like, with a very big group of people. But,
he's
like,
in some of the more regular shows in the later seasons. But yeah, like, they do specifically pick him for things that are suited to his type of thing. Like,
yeah,
this is explicitly,
they can actively mess with him.
Right. They want to bring in somebody who's going to try to win so they can mess with him as much as possible.
It's like, the rule this time is that whoever came in second place gets the point. Of course you want Brennan there.
Yeah. But it's, I don't know, it's very telling to me how much it becomes the show about Brennan when he's on the show. Especially in a lot, like, once his persona is established, it's very, like, gravitational pull. And I think it works for something like that, where it's, you know, it's written. It's a thing that has been written. It's a performance. But, like, you know, I went to a casual, like, narrative style minis game thing, and there was one person who brought the, like, just stompingest competitive list imaginable, and it was just, like, miserable.
Yeah.
And, like, that, it's interesting to see, like, how do you calibrate that?
Yeah, this is the problem that I have with, like, Magic sometimes, because my ideal Magic would be bad Magic.
Mm-hmm.
Just bad decks, and someone will always want to win.
Yeah, it's sort of the inverse of, you know, like, you go into, you know, like, if you're playing, like, I don't know, casual Commander night, and, like, sometimes you go in and you're like, I think this deck is fine. Oh, this deck is bad, actually, compared to everybody else here. But there's also, like, I think I've seen comics about this, about the Pokemon card game tournament that's, like, a bunch of kids playing and then somebody with just an absolute monster deck crushing everybody.
No fun was had for anyone.
To say the Pokemon card game does have different divisions specifically for this reason.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like a clear evolution of the type. Isn't it by age, though?
It's by age, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting that, because by age is not necessarily a good indicator.
It's not, but it tries to keep the most degenerate stuff out of the lowest tiers.
Yeah, that's fair. It was there's absolutely a Penny Arcade that's like,
Yep.
These kids are not playing each other. Their dads.
This is why I have decks that I'm trying to tune against each other when I build them. Although I think I need to spice up the out-of-the-box Mew deck at this point to hang in with this Gardevoir deck. But one of the things that, like, I'll say with Pokemon is, one of the things that is fun is finding, like, playing with the powerful decks against other powerful decks.
Yeah, like, the other like version of this, right, is like the Golden Demon painting competition. And honestly, like, the Golden Demon is not necessarily somebody out there is like, oh, that's not the most competitive painting competition, but it's like one of the most widely
It's the most well known. So
and like that's a very different. That is like bring your absolute A game. That's what this is about. You are here. You are here to convince a panel of judges that you are like one of the best painters in the world. And it's really interesting how that changes the competition too. Because I remember looking at like Golden Demon painted minis and being like winners, being like, wow, these look a little weird to me. I can't quite place it. And as I got a better painter, I was like, oh, these minis are just using every excuse to show off a variety of techniques to like basically flex on technical skill. And so they look a little weird as minis go because they're trying to be technically brilliant. It's like the constraints of the competition create this, and it's not if you just painted a mini for yourself or as part of an army or a commission or something, it wouldn't look like that because you're indexing on something else.
I've definitely heard like a critique of a lot of the awards for like art, specifically like the Academy Awards.
Yeah.
Being that the award for best direction or best costuming or best soundtrack usually goes to the movie that also fits the title of most direction or most costuming or most soundtrack.
Yeah. It's really interesting to see that how like the parameters of the competition change the way you play it. And like going back to what Belle was saying about bad magic, like there's something that's just a delight about bad magic because people aren't trying to win in 4 turns.
No.
Like a bad magic game goes on as long as a minis game. It's like a 90 to 120 minute experience.
Yeah, you might end up winning because the other person decked themselves and not because anybody was doing card draw stuff.
Yeah, nobody was milling on purpose. You just ran out of cards.
And it just creates such a different play experience because the parameters are different. And like when I played Infinity, like I guess disclosure, I played a lot of competitive Infinity for a while. And I was reasonably good. Like good enough to make it to the equivalent of Worlds. But I couldn't afford to go, so I didn't go. But it meant that I warped the local scene and could turn it into this thing where it was like, oh, it's a different kind of competition. But that was sort of intentional. I would love to be able to like define those parameters to get a different experience. And
I think this is where like a social contract comes in. Like, and especially with games like this, it probably makes sense to like I would almost be wanting to specify it by like store. Like,
yeah.
Hey, are you playing an event here? This is where you don't like. We're just having fun here. We're trying new stuff. Oh, like, please don't bring anything that's meta. Like, please just like start brewing for these events.
Yeah.
And like a lot of events will be like, hey, this is a brewers event. Like, don't just bring a meta deck. Bring something like that you created.
Yeah. And like it's hard to codify that in a way that doesn't require that you be in the know ahead of time.
I agree. Usually though, like once you've done that once, like that's like, oh hey, you might not know this, but this is usually where we play a little bit more casually. If you want to bring a deck like that, like would you want to try this place over here?
Yeah.
And like get people that's where people get brought into the conversation.
Well, I think that the rise of like game store discords has been doing that too. Because I know there are definitely places where you go if you want casual, like for a variety of different minis games. Like, do you want the casual play or do you want the serious stuff? You know, there's a local mini store that I discovered where they have tournaments, but the real competition is the painting competition that goes along with it, which is it's a super cool and just wild approach. Like the prize support and so forth for the painting competition attached to their tournaments is way more elaborate and fancy than the actual tournament itself. The tournament is mostly just an excuse for you to look at a few other people's armies and have a chance to like take some cool pictures.
I do have to say, prize support is probably one of those really tricky things, because as soon as you attach prizes like of any sort of value, that's gonna that's inherently raising the stakes.
I had that same thing, right? Like I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do this for fun and let the like serious competitors get to it. Because the prize support for this event was, like I said, it's the full set of paints. You win the full set of paints. That's $250 or so worth of paints. It's a nice prize. And yet it was still really chill. And I don't know how I feel like I want to better understand how that's accomplished so straightforwardly.
I wonder if at least part of it isn't the fact that like we are in an area where that doesn't feel as big of a deal just because we're in a very wealthy area.
Maybe, but $250 prize is better than any tournament prize I've ever gotten from Wonder. All the way up to like the Nova Open, which is a basically East Coast wide thing. That's a hefty prize.
Again, also, I think the assumption would be, hey, this is being judged by other humans, and like no one wants to judge an absolute jerk to be the winner.
Yeah, and like I didn't know that was the case until it was actually happening, but I have no idea. But presumably, other people have been there before.
I mean, how are you going to like? That's the thing is like, how would you possibly judge an art competition other than with human judges?
Oh yeah, I have no
idea. Like it's sort of
basically impossible.
Like to assign a rubric score.
But there's a difference between there is a panel of judges and the other people competing are going to be the judges.
Yeah.
And I think it probably helps.
Yeah, I mean, my assumption would have been is like, oh, like some of the people that work at the game store are going to judge or what have you, or some third-party folks that aren't competing.
Yeah, it was all turbo casual. I mean, it was casual enough that when we weren't sure if we were going to have a babysitter, the like event organizer was like, yeah, I mean, as long as your toddler is well behaved, like she's welcome to hang out. I can even scare up another mini if she wants to like slap paint on a mini. Like
that's pretty cool.
I might take them up on that in the future. That sounds hilarious. But yeah, anyway, it was a delightful time, and like it's got my like game designer brain humming. How do you engineer this? Like, what are all the pieces that go into that?
One of the coolest things, and I think I shared this in the Magic card game channel, is I think they were calling it a party box, where it was this huge nonsensical Magic deck that may or may not have also had Pokemon cards in it and Digimon cards in it, where everyone at the table was playing out of the exact same deck, and it had like modified rules to allow that to happen, but so nobody had any clue what they might draw out of it, so you were just trying to play with whatever you could get. And they basically had the booster tutor card in there, where you just opened whatever pack of anything you had. So like if it was Charlie's Angels cards from the 80s, they'd make up rules on the spot on how to play one of those cards. And like the thing is that card would live with that deck from that point on. And every additional outing would have these random cards thrown in this deck. And usually whoever added it signed the back of the card, and it was like obviously sleeved so you couldn't see the back of the card, but it seemed like a ridiculously fun experiment. Because like it's impossible to be super competitive about something like that.
I still want to take the silliest deck Tam has and play Judge's Tower with like Kodra. That's not really a competition. It's just an experiment.
So what is Windblown?
What the Dead Cells people have been up to now that they're not making Dead Cells anymore.
Oh, okay.
They decided to make a roguelike action RPG, sort of isometric top-downy, where you play as animals and die brutal deaths in trying to fight robots in a giant whirlwind.
Huh.
Unlike Dead Cells, it is co-op. Like Dead Cells, it is extremely difficult. and I've only recently been able to get past the first real boss. Like at the end of the first zone, there is a mini boss, which not that hard to beat. I beat it on my second try. I've beaten it most of the times I've gotten there. But at the end of the second zone, there is a real boss, and that boss beat me many, many times in a row. This game does also have co-op, and it's actually pretty fun in co-op. However, the system when somebody dies is absolutely awful, and I hate it. And they said everybody hates it, and they say they want to stick with it anyway. So we'll see how that goes through the development process.
I mean, Last Epoch did add additional control schemes, even though they swore they weren't going to.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Anyhow, when someone dies, you have to kill 10 enemies without getting hit once in order to revive your party member. If someone dies in a boss fight, congratulations, you are now on 1 hit point for the rest of the fight.
Oh no.
That's awful.
Yep.
So this game is really awesome and really cool, and I really want them to change this specific thing.
Hopefully someone figures out how to write a mod for that.
They put out apparently yesterday, they put out a thing saying, hey, this is why we did this, and we don't actually want to change it. And all the responses are, you what, mate?
It's that's a weird hill to die on.
It's like, okay, now we understand why you wanted to do it this way. We still
But you are incorrect.
You are wrong.
We want co-op to feel more strategic than just stacking DPS. However, as people have pointed out, their current system only rewards stacking DPS because survivability doesn't matter.
Yep.
Like, they want it to be tense when someone dies. And they do they attempt to provide ways for you to keep your party members alive. Like, if you use the healing flask, as it were, it heals everybody around you. But it's not fun. It's the worst death system I've seen in anything ever. However, solo, the game is quite hard, a lot of fun. It's fun in co-op too, until someone dies. So, I really want to see this take off. I want to see it successful. I want to see them change this because it's really cool. Like, the various weapons all have their own little mini game to get critical hits. Some of them I like more than others. I recently unlocked the giant blade, which I really love. It attempts to keep you from leaning on just one weapon by making switch attacks a thing. At a certain point in your weapons combo, you hit the other weapon button and you will use the other weapon into a special super attack. The giant blade super attack is a giant slam that sends a wave of earth forward, so of course I love it. That also happens to stun enemies it hits, so it's really strong. Yeah, I really want to see more of this. I just want them to reconsider. But yeah, a lot of fun. Rather difficult, at least at first.
I've been playing it as well. The dashing is so much fun. Like, the dashing is kind of ridiculous in this game.
Did you like Hyper Light Drifter's dash but wanted it to be a lot less fiddly? This game may be for you. Honestly, after you beat the first boss, you also get an upgrade that lets you automatically dash on platforms by just holding the button, which looks and feels cool.
The first full boss?
The first real boss, yes.
The first real boss.
Headbanger.
I have not beat the first real boss yet. There's a bunch of very cool systems in it, that makes combat interesting, and the combos you're trying to pull off and the builds you're trying to go for really fun.
What is I Am Your Beast?
It is a weird, cool puzzle game slash first person shooter / speed planning game. It's like, I think I've talked about what's the Ghost Runner before, where Ghost Runner is basically a series of levels where there's a bunch of enemies and you're cyborg ninjaing your way through this thing. And I Am Your Beast is similar to that, with a little bit more. It's a little bit more artsy and a little bit more story heavy, and it's also a little bit more forgiving and lightweight, which I think is nice. But the premise is you're that spy from the movies that has retired to the forest, and then you're called in to do one last job, but you say, no, I'm not into that. And whatever the shadowy government organization that you once worked for is well, we don't actually accept that. We're going to send people to bring you in. And you're well, that really sucks for those guys. And all of these problems that I'm about to start are your fault, FYI. And so it's just like you've got this conversation with your handler who you do not have a polite and kind relationship with. Spoilers, I guess. But yeah, it's got a like, I don't really know how to describe the art style, but it is distinctive. It's like it's like a little bit cell shaded and a little bit it reminds me of Firewatch. But it's fun and it's lightweight. There's also a whole bunch of each level you're rated based on like how fast you're able to do it and did you complete various bonus objectives. And so just beating it and seeing the story and so forth, not that difficult. Actually hitting those bonus objectives, nuts. There's some that are like, don't kill any enemies. It's not don't kill any enemies. It's no enemies can die. Difficulty, you're not the only thing that can kill enemies. So you need to make sure that they don't die, that like other people don't kill them too.
Mm-hmm.
You have to like protect people from the environment.
Who are themselves your enemies.
Yes,
so,
who are
yeah.
themselves. Like they are trying to kill you. It's got a very like action movie ethos to it, which I think is super fun. Because they'll do stuff like you don't reload guns. That's just not a thing you do. You throw them at people when they're empty and pick up a new one from the next guy you take down.
Yeah.
Or a nearby table or whatever.
Look, reloading guns takes time.
I clearly need to play this. That was my favorite thing from Mirror's Edge 1.
Yes, it's very much that vibe. Like, I land on somebody, I grab their gun, I shoot a guy with a knife, I throw the gun at another person, I pick up the knife, I throw it at another person. It's got this like
super hot, yeah.
Yeah, it's got that like flow to it that when you hit the flow, you're like, oh, this feels so cool. It's really I've been really enjoying it. There's like I cap out on like my threshold for it, but because like it's intense or can be intense, but like it's just impeccable vibes and like it is really fun to have that like almost like a scramble, super hot Mirror's Edge style combat.
Well, and so super hot, like everything was slow, like everything moved at the speed you were moving at, and so it was kind of cerebral. Cough. Like, is there something in this that like allows you to do that, or is it just quick retry type of deal?
It's quick retries and much shorter levels. Like level times are in seconds. Not
I'm getting sold real hard because I can beat any screen in Celeste if you give me, it might be a 3-second screen.
And yeah, this is probably like 30 to 45 seconds, but it's not. The levels are not long.
But that's like a 30 to 45 second level that you retry a whole bunch. Sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've been really enjoying it. Like I was specifically thinking of you when I put this on here because I thought you might really like it because I remember you talking about Mirror's Edge combat, and this has that vibe. It's really fun. It's also got a cool like, I don't know. I like the way they do the narrative part.
The narrative sounds really cool to me. I think it does sound like it would be my jam. Very Jason Bourne.
Yes. Very like, I am done with this. You need to understand, like, you sending people against me is you doing a disservice to your people. Please stop. It doesn't have to go badly, but it will.
Or I guess the more relevant thing would probably be John Wick, but I've not seen actually any John Wick movies.
Me either.
They're amazing. They are worth the hype. So I know we've talked about this before, but you've been playing a lot more Tactical Breach Wizards?
I have managed to get quite a ways into it. I'm now in the last chapter. And this story and this gameplay and this world keeps like building on itself in such interesting ways. And like it keeps surprising me. Like I'm in level 4 and I'm like still unlocking new characters and new abilities. And this story that started very small is spiraling completely out of control while still keeping like a very personal edge to it. But I mean, it's a deeply political story. It's about like we're currently, I think the backstory I've seen, I've heard references to World War 3, 4, 5, and 6. So it's
Yikes.
and like the big thing is this is like My Hero Academia rules. Not everyone has a quirk or in this game unlocks. Very few people unlock, and when they do, they get a specific weird thing that they're capable of doing. Your starting two characters are Zan, whose unlock allows them to see like I think it's 1 to 6 seconds into the future. And so Zan is just constantly like, Zan is the whole mechanics of this game. Like, I can always retry. Like, I can always issue different orders. I can see what is going to happen if I do this, if I do that. I can always rewind to previous orders and submit different tactical decisions. Because I've got somebody who is just like able to see into the future and issue different commands. And then you've got Jen, who is a storm mage. She's able to hit things in a way that makes them get pushed around a bunch. She's kind of your heavy hitter, but you're dealing with a rogue PMC outfit headed by Zan's old crew member who he failed to rescue in an op. He had the choice between the target and her, and he chose to stay with the mission. And so she got grabbed. And her thing is she's able to operate like at superhuman speeds. So everyone has their own, and it's interesting to see how the various characters grapple with the ways that they understand this magic, and they're learning about ways like governments are reacting to these rogue people suddenly having this power. And I just dealt with like this entire there's one nation you go to which is like a nation that venerates the dead, and like you start to encounter people who are able to like resurrect you, like, and this character gets resurrected. They're like, no, that I didn't actually die because death is too important to my culture to accept that I have gone across the veil. That wasn't real. Like, I've got characters having anxiety dreams. The writing is really top notch. And
I'm fascinated that the writing is the like notable thing, because like the gameplay looked really cool.
The gameplay is
fun. Sold me.
It is at this point. It's definitely good the way that they unlock things for you slowly and over time, because otherwise these characters would be completely overwhelming. I got dropped into an anxiety mission with somebody who was feeling like a sense of inferiority, and the character that you are playing with is them but with all of their perks unlocked. And it's like, what can you do if this character has all of their different options unlocked to you? Oh, they can just like go everywhere around this map. There are tactics available to you that are like really deep, because one of the things they have is the ability to do a charge, and if their charge hits something, then they get to refresh that charge. But they also have the ability to put down a barrier, and yes, hitting the barrier recharges their charge. So it becomes like, oh, I can play a little bit of the block moving game with this. Sokuban.
This makes me think of the fun I've been having in Rogue Trader, where I've just breaking the action economy of that game in half with people's special abilities. It's very fun.
Well, yeah, like there's a character whose like power is spend mana to give actions to other characters. And then the last arc of it, a lot of what I'm doing is the game is throwing a bunch of different character sets together and being like, how do these two characters interact well? Like, can you figure out what they're good at and like where their strengths and weaknesses? And then usually it all culminates into a big pitched battle where it's like, oh, I have all my characters and now I have to do something ridiculous.
Makes me think of Blades of the Shogun?
The roguelike?
The what?
The roguelike?
No. The tactical...
Shadow Tactics?
Shadow Tactics, yes. What do I think that was called?
What am I using it? Because that's the subtitle of that game. What am I thinking of?
Yes. Similar vibe, where it's like, how do I use these people to the best of their abilities to orchestrate something incredible?
I was thinking of Shogun Showdown.
Aha! I don't know that one.
It's a roguelike.
It's also fun because there are all of these optional things in this game that are like, hey, can you do this thing? And it's like, sure. Like I just got have the team use 16 different abilities on one turn, finish this entire mission by the end of turn 1, and deal 20 damage with a single attack. Which is, most things deal, like the thing that deals the most damage written says deal 5 damage. So it's definitely, how can I manipulate this situation to my advantage? And how can I make use of the ridiculous set of abilities granted to me?
So recently I've been kind of bouncing around between games quite a bit. Like I played Wayfinder, was not quite landing on any of them and have recently like gone through a whole spate of single player games. But for a little bit, and I still I've popped in periodically, I decided to play Return of Reckoning, which is a decade-old emulator server for Warhammer Online. Like this is a big enough This is a big enough server that there's around 3,000-ish players regularly, and also has Twitch drops.
Okay, that's funny.
Twitch drops. Wow.
Yes, there are Twitch drops for this emulator server for a long dead game.
Wow.
Incredible.
I have enjoyed myself. I'm playing a little dwarf like I played, in retail. But the thing that has struck me the most about this game is how far ahead of its time it was. This game came out 1 year after the release of Burning Crusade. It had, I believe, the first implementation of public quests.
The first one I remember.
It had the first implementation of marking quest areas on the in-game map that wasn't a janky mod. It had quite possibly some of the most unique class combinations.
What, you didn't like Thoughtbot?
Like it had so many things going on that it took a really long time for other games to pick up. And like, honestly, the public quests are still better than most public quests in any modern MMORPG. Like, they're really good, and they're fun, and they're repeatable. And the thing I like the most about them is the deterministic aspect of them. Like, when you win a loot bag, you get to choose an item from this long list of items. So it like rewards players for repeating it. Because like if there's nothing you want in the list, you can pick up this currency that there's vendors in the zone that sell crazy nice items for that currency. There's just a lot of interesting things going on in this game. I mean, the problem is like the PvE aspect of the game peters out as you go up in level, and I think in production I made it to 35.
Yeah.
And at that point, like so basically how the zones are laid out is there's 4 tiers for every zone or every racial combination. So like every race is diametrically opposed to a different race. So like it's dwarves versus green skins, empire versus chaos. And like the first zone is like 90% PvE content, 10% PvP content. And that scale drastically shifts to where like the final tier is like maybe 20% PvE content, 80% PvP content.
So while I did actually play PvP in this game and kind of liked it, I did not make it past the second tier at any times trying to play this game when it was live.
I liked the PvP arenas, the not so much the open world PvP.
Kill the dude with the thing.
Kill the dude with the thing. Yes,
that was the best of them.
That was the best one.
Like Temple of Morcanen or Mordenkainen or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. But yeah, I somewhere in the 30s, I petered out because they really wanted you to move over to open world PvP. That wasn't what I wanted to do.
Like I know I'm gonna peter out at about the same time if I continue to play this. It's just been shocking how modern this game from 2008 feels as stacked against modern MMORPGs. And so, Tab, you said you've been playing this or have played it?
I loaded this up briefly, and I remember because I forget what made me think of I remember it had wild character classes. Like some of them are very normal, and some of them are absolutely
yes.
Yeah, they're just bonkers. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the thing that I was like, I remember I was when this game came out, I was taking myself much too seriously. What were the bonkers things that I could have been doing and wasn't because I was playing like a witch hunter, which was both bad and boring.
I thought Witch Hunter was good. It was just boring.
Witch Hunter
was just a WoW rogue.
Witch Hunter was the bad WoW rogue, and the Witch Elf was the good WoW rogue.
That's what I'm remembering. Yep. Okay. There was a lot of that. The Dark Elf equivalent of the War Priest was just so much better than War Priest.
Yeah.
I loved the Oathbreaker, I think was the name, the Dwarven tank, because like at that point WoW was really struggling with resource gain and doing interesting things when you ran out of resources, and that class had a rage-like mechanic and another mechanic called Grudge that was basically the counterpoint, so that if you were low on rage, you were almost always going to have a bajillion grudge to spend, so you can spin down your grudge until you get back your rage. So like it never felt like I didn't have a button to push. And like WoW tanks at that era were like, I'm out of buttons to push for a while.
Like, well, this sucks.
And the thing that I loved about their PvP implementation, though, is that tanks had a role in PvP. Yeah. My taunt debuffed the hell out of whatever I taunted. I had physical collision. I could literally put my body in a narrow gap between the enemy and my healer and protect my healer. Like, it was doing a bunch of interesting things. Like, there's some things that are still annoying, like the whole hostile target, friendly target, having two separate targets.
I really like that. I wish more games would do it.
It's great if you're playing a healer or something like that. It's less great if you're playing a class that doesn't really do anything with the friendly targets.
Fair.
Like, because like I had a thing where like I could put my oath shield or whatever on a single target. So like I would target one person once and it would stay there. And I never had anything else to do with the friendly target. But yeah, it's like, it's interesting. I'm shocked at how dedicated of a community that it has.
Yeah, I feel like it would have to.
Like, it does something really interesting, and I don't know if this was in the game or if this is something they've coded in. But basically, when you roll a character, you are instantly thrown into a guild called Order or Chaos. So you're instantly in a guild with other players. And if you so choose, you can leave it and form your own guild. But it's been shocking how beneficial that has been. And it's wild how actively people group. That is the thing that like doesn't ever happen in emulator servers. They are usually designed around an economy that's entirely solo, but people are still actively grouping, which is wild. Like, it reminds me a lot of our experience with City of Heroes.
Yeah.
Where here's this time capsule of a dead game that is still very much alive.
I feel like it manages to still have just enough stuff that it's doing differently that people remember it fondly.
Like, it's still a really good PvP game if that's what you're wanting. Its conquest mode is real good. I think we're slowly running out of time. I do want to talk very, 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 very briefly about Dark Age or Dragon Age Veilguard. It's got a weird amount of negativity surrounding this game, but it's really good. I don't want to go into any level of detail about it, but basically, like, if you can get past the idea that Dragon Age is no longer a turn-based game and is instead an action combat game.
It has. Can I take this opportunity to say, Origins is not a good turn-based game. Origins is not a good strategic game. It never has been.
Like they've always tried to like well, they flirted with this line of being actiony and being strategic and not really doing either one great.
Well, they wanted to go real time with pause because Baldur's Gate was real time with pause, so they did, and it sucked.
Yeah.
So, like, this is just an action combat game. Like, it reminds me a lot of Immortals Phoenix Rising.
Interesting
like
comparison.
Like, that wasn't a great selling game, but like it was kind of a mythological Genshin clone in some aspects. But like, there's a lot of that kind of rudimentary puzzles out in the world, things to unlock. Honestly, kind of the same stuff that's happening in Wayfinder, where like there's a lot of stuff in the world that you can go revisit, but like when you're going through the world, it's more constrained than the Hinterlands was.
That's a good thing.
That's a good thing. It honestly reminds me a lot more of Mass Effect than it does like playing a Dragon Age game, and I don't know how to quantify that. Mostly, I guess, because Mass Effect is a more actiony game. It's really good. I'm about 13 hours in ish. Really enjoying myself. Like, there's some stuff that I had to kind of get past because there's a bit of an uncanny valley thing going on with the character models. They are stylized and they have some weird proportions going on where like their heads are a little too big for their bodies and their eyes are a little too big for their heads. But once you get used to it, it's fine. It's kind of a Pixar looking style. Combat seems interesting enough. Like, I'm actually doing interesting things with the talent points, which I never felt like I was doing in Inquisition.
So when you say actiony, is it more like a Mass Effect 3 style game?
You are constantly like interactively doing attacks, like left button, right button, mouse attacks, and also hotkeys. You've got, I think, 3 abilities and an ultimate. And then you've got your basic attacks in addition to that. There's dodges.
Are you aiming those attacks?
Yeah, you're aiming those attacks. Well, I mean, like, melee is less aimy, but yeah, if you're being a ranged character, you're aiming those attacks. You can determine whether or not you're auto aiming or not. Like, there's a whole bunch of options that you can choose from. Like, if you just want it to auto aim for you, you can make it do that. If you want to strategically aim the attacks, you can do that too. There's break bars, there's, all sorts of stuff like that going on too. I mean, honestly, I'd say it's probably a little bit better combat than, say, the Final Fantasy VII Remake was, but it's also not dissimilar to the way that felt. I mean, you can command the other people, but mostly they just kind of do their thing. Like, you can hit tab to bring up essentially a wheel of abilities, and you can manually tell them to do a thing, but honestly, I'm just letting them do their own thing. and I've got different characters spec'd in different ways. It's pretty cool. I mean, and the story's been good. The story's been pretty good. I've enjoyed it a lot.
Nice. Yeah, I've had too many things that I'm playing, but I definitely want to give it a go.
Like, I've been on a single player binge, and I kind of go through these every so often. So, like, I burned through Space Marine 2 and enjoyed it greatly. Then I burned through Final Fantasy 16 and enjoyed it greatly. And now I'm playing Veilguard.
I've been on a rhythm game kick, so I have not caught up to Veilguard or really even finished Metaphor.
I haven't even started Metaphor. I've been playing through Rogue Trader. There's suddenly a lot of games that I want to give a shot to.
Any final thoughts or topics about anything?
Go vote.
Yep. Please do.
Yes.
Anyway, well, hopefully you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again next week. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
See you.